sort of like what is the mind, what is the frontier of the mind, and also maybe something for you to take away, sort of like what is this practice of lucid dreaming, what is it, how can you use it, how can you practice it, how can you explore your mind. Yeah, so I'll speak for a few minutes about that, and if you're interested, then feel free to listen. Okay, let's go. All right, well, lucid dreaming is a practice that's actually quite ancient. It goes back to things like Tibetan Buddhism, where they practice dream yoga, and lucid dreaming is sort of this recognition that you have while you're dreaming, and you realize you're dreaming while you're dreaming. And so once you have that recognition, your perception changes, and the content of your dream changes, and you have some control over the dream. And so I guess I can tell you a little bit about how you can practice that. Similar to meditation, lucid dreaming is a learnable skill. You can learn that by practicing how to lucid dream. It's quite difficult, and it is a practice, but there's certain things you can do. Number one is dream recall. So when you wake up, you need to figure out how can you actually remember those small fragments of your dreams, because most of the time, for most people, when you wake up, you do not remember anything. You just it sort of erases itself very quickly out of your memory, and then you go about starting your day, and you don't remember much of the dream. And so you need to sort of like build this practice where you learn how to like remember your dreams, and I think that's sort of a prerequisite for being able to lucid dream. The second thing I would say is like reality checks, and this is like things that other people say. Sort of like if you check different communities around lucid dreaming, people sort of advocate for dream recall and then reality checks. Now, what is a reality check? A reality check is something that basically checks your reality while you're awake. So it's sort of this habit that you install, and there's different kind of things you can do. So for example, a light switch doesn't really work as well as it does in waking state. There's other kinds of like reality checks, so you can do some research into this. I guess the most important thing is to find one that sticks with you, that actually you then repeatedly do, and then sort of like you have this like habit of doing it, and the more you do it while you're awake, then you would automatically at some point do that while you dream. And then if you do that reality check while you dream, then you would realize, well, wait a minute, I'm dreaming, and then you realize that you're dreaming, and then you can start your lucid dream. The other thing is about stabilizing the lucid dream, although that's really for people who already know how to lucid dream on a regular basis, because sometimes you get so excited about being lucid that then sort of the dream collapses, and so there's also techniques about how to stabilize your dream. Generally, I would say as a third thing is meditation. Meditation is sort of this practice of this creating the space for yourself while you're awake, to sort of zoom out, have a perspective. And obviously there's a lot of literature there, different techniques. I think it's just more important that there's a lot of resources, apps to help you how to meditate. The thing I would say is like just find space on a daily basis, just like you find space for sleeping, find space for meditation. And so the more you have a meditation practice, the more you sort of like that feeds into the lucid dreaming practice, because lucid dreaming is a trainable skill, and the more you're sort of aware of yourself, and you don't react to everything immediately, and feel like sort of the more you remove yourself from yourself and you have some like space in between yourself, then that sort of like is a good supporting role for lucid dreaming. Yeah, and there's like other certain techniques. Perhaps another thing is sort of understanding why you want to lucid dream, like what sort of like why you want to do it. And I think the more you know why you want to do it, then you sort of like you have some like purpose for it and can get motivation, and sort of a reason helps you to sort of keep going on the practice. Yeah, so this is like it's a deep topic. It's interesting. A lot of people ask, okay, why lucid dream? And I think like it's a very neutral space, and so you can use that for entertaining things. That's what a lot of people do at the beginning. But I think there's a potential that once you sort of like regularly access lucid dreaming, that you can use that to help you face your fears, process trauma, deal with anxieties, and that kind of stuff, and really heal yourself in some way, and deal with your reality in a way so you're better equipped to go after what you want to do. All right, so that's just like a short note of lucid dreaming. I'll speak a little bit about the frontier of the mind, since that's also something that I mentioned in the talk, in the event. What is the frontier of the mind? Well, the idea is, and this is like basically ancient technology. It's sort of introspective technologies that have existed, like meditation, like dreams, and the idea is to sort of understand the nature of the self, the nature of reality, explore consciousness, and it's still seen very much as an esoteric field that doesn't hold much value. And sort of the goal of getting people together into these spaces is to figure out, okay, who are the people working on this, so we can map out who are the people working in neuroscience, exploring the brain, people working on sleep technologies, meditation technologies, lucid dreaming technologies. But unfortunately, it works still very disconnected from each other, and the industry doesn't really exist in the same way AI exists, in the same way blockchain exists. So the goal is to figure out how can we establish a frontier of the mind, so people actually sort of are excited about exploring, in a tangible way, where people can build applications for the brain applications using neural interfaces. And I think especially with AI now, there'll be a lot of ways we can create new types of media, we can create new types of experiences, and we can build platforms where people can have sort of the space and capacity to heal themselves from whatever it is that they're affected by, that still sort of affects them from the past, whether that's some trauma, some fear that they carry, some anxiety, things like that. I think everyone has. I mean, certainly mental health is a big problem in society, and I think we need to figure out how we can have new mechanisms to deal with those things. And while I think it's good that we have all these established frontiers, from AI to robotics, it is also important that we sort of spend some value and some attention and capital towards exploring the mind sciences. So that's to do with basically perception, and how can we understand the nature of reality, which is not what, reality is not really what we think it is. And there's so many open questions. Some of them are more philosophical than others, but I do think we're living in this world where everything is becoming in some sense more disconnected, people spending so much time on the screens. And while a lot of that has a lot of value, I think we also need to find a way for humanity to reconnect with nature, live more within, sort of sustainably more within the environment, things that, things that we don't do to destroy ourselves. And so I do think if we can develop sort of technologies that are mind technologies, then sort of we can be finding new types of meaning again for what it is to be human, and find kind of a new kind of purpose and sort of plane of reality that we can exist in, which should be very exciting. And also I think it's important, as sort of AI replaces all these other things that we think we're not able to do at some point anymore. Yeah, so this is something that I think usually is difficult to do as an individual or as a startup. So the question is how can we build this industry and this ecosystem of people where people can contribute, and we can collaborate and create this global type of movement of people doing this. And that's what we're doing at Network, where we're trying to see, okay, how can you start this movement and also build obviously technologies that sort of have this kind of factor of meditation or dreaming, and that sort of uses AI and neural interfaces to develop new kinds of media, new kinds of experiences, so people have some connection to their subconscious, and then they can sort of unlock some mental patterns and free themselves in some capacity, so they have more mental mobility to go after their dreams and after what they want to do. Now the problem is that the mind sciences are seen as a very esoteric field. Therefore, it's hard to get people convinced to invest capital into this, or for people to stake their career working in this. And while we do have a lot of ancient wisdom and knowledge, and while we do have a lot of people working on this, you know, in many different ways. Like I mentioned before, it is very, it doesn't sort of work as a unified layer and as a movement. And so the question is like, how can we do this? And that's why I thought it'd be good to like get people together in some ways. Now, obviously, there's so much happening, and people are easily distracted by all these other events and things that are going on. And so we're trying to see, okay, how can you get people incentivized to collaborate and work together, get people together in working groups or something like that. So that's why I felt like, okay, even if we couldn't do the space, tonight, then at least, you have this message here. So you have some overview of like, first, why is it important that we spend more time dreaming? How can we build technologies for dreams? How can we build technologies generally for the mind, unlock brain-computer applications? How can we sort of like be part of this movement of exploring the mind, of asking these big questions about what's the nature of reality, what's consciousness, but also I think these very tangible questions that people deal with every day. I think everyone can like appreciate that, it's easy to be your own worst enemy, to be in your way in some ways, and destroy yourself, censor yourself, limit yourself. I think everyone can sort of like appreciate that anyone is doing that to some extent. And so as much progress as we're making on the material plane, I do think we need to figure out how we can find ways to heal ourselves and to deal with this kind of stuff. And it's definitely something that is scientifically established, things like lucid dreaming, and maybe if we're talking about astral projection, it's more speculative, but this is a deep frontier, and it's quite valuable. So hopefully we can get people together to do this in a way where there's more capital and more people, and then over time it'll be like this reality that people exist in, and people sort of like build on top of all these different foundations that we've built, and then we have a unified network, and we can really go after these deep questions. And I think that's important, because there's nothing worse than a way if you're like mentally prisoner of yourself, and if you don't have a way to like get out of that, and everything is like happening so fast and we're rushing towards something, but sometimes you need to take like pause and reflect and be able to like reconfigure yourself and have some different type of like perspective on things, and then be more effective in that way. And I do think that it's almost like something like dreaming is like the secret that's in nature that the Western mind has forgotten to look at, because we have spent so much time conquering the material plane that we have forgot to spend time looking inward. And a lot of this time when people say they look inward, if you don't look inward very deeply, then it's just like the psychology and the stuff like that doesn't translate into higher meaning and purpose. And then a lot of people, they look at that and then they think, oh, it's just superficial, but it's actually something that is quite deep and quite unexplored. And there's it's like I said, very ancient. Yeah, so I think I've spoken for a few minutes. The reason was to like just give people like an update about what we're working on, what is the reason why we're doing this and why it's important. And it's supposed to be a dialogue and not me just talking, but I felt because people have problems joining the space on X, at least I can talk a little bit about lucid dreaming, which I did, and then talk about the frontier of the mind, what that is, why that is important. And yeah, it's really infinite. It goes in so many different directions, and we could imagine futures where people will like design different kinds of dreams for people to be guided to solve certain kind of problems that they have, certain mental patterns that could be unlocked. There's really a lot of different applications, and that's just like one domain. That's the domain I'm very interested in, which is with dreams. Take advanced meditative states like jhanas. Really, there's like a lot of different things we can tackle. I mean, people are also working on sleep itself. So what I would love to see is just like, okay, how can we create this as a movement? And I think that's where like I'm trying to see, okay, how can we get people together and like there's more interaction, there's more dialogue, so we can all figure this out together. Just how like early blockchain networks bootstrap themselves. AI is also something, you know, that wasn't sort of this cohesive movement that it is now. So there must be some way to build, you know, sort of a neural movement, which includes, you know, the brain and neuroscience and brain-computer interfaces and EEG and all these kinds of technologies and things that people are developing. But it also includes the mind sciences, which is this more elusive, introspective, inward-looking technologies, which is, you know, meditation, dreams. There are so many other things that are connected to that, and really find a mechanism by which people can, like, you know, be incentivized to work together, and there's some forcing function, so we have this neural economy and people actively working on these things in a way that's less academic and, you know, more like sort of like grassroots, and people actually meeting in the world, just like, you know, right now people are like meeting around the world within networks in the blockchain space or in the AI space, and they're all sort of like working together, pushing towards something. And I think we can also do this within neuroscience and the mind sciences, and have this like field. And the good thing is, like, we have a lot of ancient knowledge, we have a lot of people actively working on all these different projects, so hopefully we kind of can find a way to do this. Yeah, all right, well, I've talked for a while, so I'll stop here. Thanks for listening, if you got so far. Yeah, all right, thank you.